Hello, everyone. How you doing? Welcome
Good,
to Whining
thank
On.
you.
My name is Matthew Bowden, the Intellectual Rogue, and today I'm here with Michiel Hesseling. Hello, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And you?
Oh, nice to see you. Yeah, I can't complain. It's raining here in London, as it always is. I heard in Holland it's much the same.
Yeah, today we had a lucky day.
I'm happy. So let's get straight into it. I've done a little bit of research in the coming days coming up to this, and you were described as a child virtuoso.
Yes, well, child, I started juggling when I was 14, so I wasn't quite a young child, but yeah, I guess I was talented, luckily, and I practiced a lot, so I got
So it leads to
quite
the
good.
question, why? Why
Why?
begin?
Why begin? A friend of mine. I was at the Boy Scouts at the time when I was 14, and a friend of mine had just learned to juggle 3 balls from another friend, and he showed it to me there, and I thought, oh, that's fun. So I picked it up. I was playing baseball at the time. I always liked any ball sport with my hands. So, and playing pinball, which is sort of like juggling. So yeah, he just taught it to me, and then with a few friends, we started practicing together. We saw each other once a week, sometimes twice a week, show each other what we'd learned in the meanwhile. And this was before the days of YouTube, of course. So you didn't have any examples. You just had to try and figure it all out by yourself.
So you did one of the things I heard for the first time, even though I was aware of it myself, when I watched Frodo. Well, watched when I was in Frodo's interview for the first time. I heard this thing said social juggling. I'd never really thought of it like that. I'd always seen it as artistic or sporting, but I suppose it is a very social thing, juggling with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, it was anyway. It was, we would go out in the park and hang out and juggle, especially later on when I was like 16, 17. After a while, we were just in the park every day, and you have a fixed spot, and everybody would just show up and hang out. And part of the time you juggle, part of the time you just chat, and you go do other things afterwards. Yeah.
And were you guys kind of young, crazy kids? Were you drinking, partying? Was this part of the juggling process, or?
Drinking, not so much. Smoking more. Weed. Or hash at the time. There was not so much weed. But drinking, no, I didn't start drinking till I was like 18, and even then I wasn't drinking much. So there wasn't much drinking. No, just and partying. Yeah, sure, we had our share of parties.
Yeah. And how many hours a week were you doing then? When you found it, was it something that you became completely obsessed with instantly, or did it take a bit of time to develop the obsession?
Yeah, it took a little bit of time at the beginning, just a little bit here and there, and but after a while, I mean, once I finished high school, then I had no other obligation, so to say. So I was practicing a lot. Then in my final year of high school, I only practiced 1 hour a day because I thought, like, if I don't set myself a limit, I'll be juggling way too much, and I wanted to finish high school. So that's what I did.
It's very much a passion, by the sounds that. If you're saying I must only juggle 1 hour a day, then you are. Maybe the word obsessed isn't the correct word, but it's verging on that. Surely, if you're,
it was definitely
having to limit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember also at one point we had a gym. At one point, we were very lucky in Amsterdam. I think in '86 or something, or '85, we got a gym that we could go to all the time, basically. So I remember even going there sometimes, like midnight. I was like, oh, I feel like juggling, so I would just go to the gym, and I would be there by myself and juggle a bit. But yeah.
And were the people who were trainers there? Was the people you looked up to as skilled jugglers?
No, not really. I mean, there were skilled jugglers, but there wasn't. I mean, when I was young, yeah, of course. I mean, I remember seeing Tony Duncan in the park. I mean, Tony Duncan is a very good juggler. If you're not a juggler, and most older jugglers will know him, an American guy. So I was still a beginning juggler when I saw him, and he was standing there doing, I think, 7 balls or something. So I was like, oh, fantastic. And when I was, I think, 15 or so, 15, I met Lee Hayes in the park. Lee Hayes, some of you might know him, a good friend of mine. He just come that day out of the States. He decided to move to Holland, and he had like juggling clubs, and he could pass clubs. It was like, wow, somebody could pass clubs. So yeah, at that time you look up to somebody. He could do that, and but then once we had that gym, we were all together. No, this was, and also like I said, I was quite talented. So after a while, I didn't have anybody anymore that I could look up to there. I mean, that was mainly from videos and stuff, watching Francis Brunn.
Yeah. And was there a show element in it? Did you see it as a medium performance as well as just being this technical problem that you could solve?
Well, both. In the beginning, it was mainly the juggling, the puzzle that you're making, the picture that you make in front of you. And I mean, I did my first show when I just learned how to juggle, and that was fun, but it wasn't like, this is what I wanted to do. That came a bit later. Like I guess so on the Leidseplein is a well-known juggling of a street performing pitch in Amsterdam. It's a bit like Covent Garden you have in London. We have the Leidseplein. Not anymore. Now it's not a good pitch anymore, but back then it was. And like when I saw the first shows there, like Cyrus and Birdie, 2 Americans that came to Amsterdam, it was amazing.
What year was this?
This was 1984. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're still quite a young chap by that age. You're looking at 14, 15. This is when you're just beginning.
15, I think I was. Yeah. And I mean, it was, we had all, like I said, there was no YouTube, so you had no examples. Like at one point somebody had seen a club juggler, so there was no juggling shop. The only juggling shop was in New York somewhere. So we made our own juggling clubs out of plastic pins and put PVC pipes in it and juggle and stuff. So when these 2 guys came from the States and they had like a tall unicycle, they had fire torches, and they did it was a fantastic show. It was an accordion and a drum kit, and I was their groupie. I would just carry their stuff to the hotel room, count their heads, and it was amazing. I hadn't seen anything like it before. So yeah, and
so there was this understanding of it being a performance medium from the beginning. It wasn't a sort of technical juggling in isolation. You knew that this thing could be used as a performative medium as well.
Pretty soon, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and
I loved it. Yeah,
and you said earlier on that you were learning from DVDs.
Not so much DVDs. It was like at a juggling festival. There was this guy in Germany, Karl-Heinz Sieten, and he had has this large juggling collection of photos and videos. So at my first juggling convention in 1984 in Frankfurt, he showed some videos, and that was like I saw Ignatov and Francis Brunn for the first time. Amazing jugglers. And it was like, whoa, amazing. But then the next time I could see it was, I think, when I went to the circus school when I was 17 or so, or 18.
What was the experience like in 84 when you're seeing this stuff as a young man? Is it like this kind of hidden wealth of knowledge? Like some guy invited you back of the shop to see this incredible collection?
Yeah. I mean, it was at a juggling convention, so there was already a lot of impressions there. I mean, it was amazing. There was 4 days, I think, or so. It was the juggling convention, and there was, Andrew Allen was there, a very good juggler. Cotton, I saw for the first time, Cotton McAloon. I'm sure you've heard his name plenty of times. And so, yeah, just the impression of all these jugglers. We'd just been doing, 5 balls was already pushing my limits at that time. And then suddenly you see all these possibilities, all these people doing this amazing stuff. So the videos were just an extension of that at the time.
And what was the community like there?
Where are you in Frankfurt?
Yeah, your first juggling
at the convention.
When the sort of the social aspect of it.
It was an experience. I mean, I was a young boy, and there was mainly older people. Older, I mean, like 5 years older or 10 years older. And it was very welcome, and it was like a family right away that you could take part of. I remember Chris was there from Chris and Alex, and he was a good juggler, and like I was really shy, and I was like, whoa, he's so good. So I walk up to him and say, you want to pass clubs with me? And he was like, oh, sure. I'll pass clubs with you. And I'm, trying my best to keep up with him, and he's very good. So I always remember that later on as well. It's like when people ask you that, yeah, pass with them, even if it's not going to be very challenging for you, just pass it on, because that's what I experienced there. Just the welcoming and the family, and it was fun.
And so just to go into a bit more depth of your progression, can you go through a little bit of how you learned so quickly, what you learned, how your learning progressed?
Well, I think one thing that was very beneficial, like I said, I think I have a natural ability for juggling, so I was lucky with that. So I just used that by practicing, obviously, because I also know people that are very talented but didn't practice much, and then you don't get anywhere, of course. So also that 1 hour a day actually for me was very beneficial. I noticed there. Which I didn't think of before. Like I said, I just limited my time, but I had made a little schedule of I'm going to practice this for 5 minutes, that for 10 minutes, this for 5 minutes, etc. And just to have that incredible focus for 1 hour, I think was better than if I would have just been in a gym for 3 hours and just kind of, because I was in my room. It was in my room, in my house. It was a tiny little room. If there was like these metal pipes on the side that were going from the bottom to the top of the apartment building, if I would hit it, it was for the heating. If I would hit it, all 8 floors would hear that noise. So I could not hit that. I had to be very careful where I'd throw the balls. It was a low ceiling. So just to have that focus and to have to be so precise, I think that was really good. That really helped me to progress quickly.
There's perhaps something in that as well of organization. Not every person would schedule their time juggling. I've known a lot of jugglers, and it tends to be kind of juggling. They'll go there and they'll just have fun and muck about, and they wouldn't go, right, I need to practice this here, this here, this here. And I assume you had goals at the end of that. You had a thing of, I want to achieve doing this.
Yes, definitely. I had goals at that time, although I don't often set goals, but at that time I did have goals. Like one of the things I was working really hard on was 5 balls and 7 balls. And I had this trick that I wanted to learn was the Mills mess with 5 balls. There was nobody yet that did it, as far as I knew, and as far as I still know. Nobody did it yet, and I had Andrew Allen, very good juggler. He taught me 3 balls Mills mess, and I asked him, "Does anybody do it with more balls?" He said, "No, I think somebody has done it with 4, but I've never heard of anybody doing it with 5." So I thought, okay, this is going to be my mission for the winter. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm going to learn 5 ball Mills mess, and then So yeah, that was my goal, was to make a 5 ball routine, learn a few of those tricks, and but I've also done a lot of what you say, just go out in the park and juggle and whatever and hang out.
Yeah. Did you? So just a quick thing to perhaps annoy other people out there who are learning juggling, who have learned juggling. You just go through the time scale of 3 balls, 5 balls, 7 balls. How long it took you to go between those markers?
There was quite a bit of time in between, because actually, like 5 balls, I think 5 balls I learned when I was 15. So I learned 3 balls when I was 14, and then 5 balls when I was 15, and I think 7 when I was 16. And I know now people learn a lot faster, because it's like with any sport as well. The tennis level now is incredibly high compared to 30 years ago. And part of it is because you can just see it. Back then, I hardly knew that 7 balls was possible. I'd seen Tony Duncan once do it, and he was like a god to me, of course. And also now you go online and you see a YouTube video and you see somebody doing 5 club back crosses, like it's nothing. So that becomes your state of mind. For us, our state of mind was like 5 balls is really difficult,
Well, it's also this thing. I became reasonably proficient quite quickly at contact juggling, and I think the reason I could have done that is because I had a DVD called In Isolation, and I could watch it and then stop it and go back, watch it again and go, oh, he moved his arm in this way, this moved in this way, and you can study the physical movement.
Yes. Well, I remember I was I did 3 months of circus school in Chalon in France. The Centre Perfectionnement was like it was because they have a 4-year course there, but I did 3 months. And they had a video room, so I would go in the room. I put on Sergei Ignatov, and I was working on 5 club back crosses. So I would watch him, and I would just kind of put myself in his body and try to feel that rhythm. And then I would run downstairs, go to the gym, and juggle 5 clubs. And for the first few minutes, it would be great. I would feel that rhythm, and then slowly I could feel it disappear again, and I would go back to the video room, watch it again. So it was kind of like your experience, except that it was only in the circus school that the DVD player was was available.
Well, I learned this thing after that professional weightlifters and all different kinds of professional level sportsmen now, when they work with psychologists, what they'll do is they'll film their best performance and they'll make them watch it over and over again and visualize how they felt there and try and emulate that feeling to perhaps do the same thing you're talking about, get that physical understanding.
I think that really works. For me, it did.
Yeah. And so when you were juggling, you got up to 17, and was that the first time you started really focusing on doing shows and conventions? Did you street shows first?
I started performing when I was 15. I was still in high school, and I'd seen Cyrus and Birdie that summer, and so Lee Hayes and I decided to make a show together, and we were going to perform it in the summer or in the spring on the Leidse Plein. But then I was talking to a teacher of mine in high school, and he was playing in a band. So he said, well, why don't you come and perform in the intermission of our band? So we did. So my first show, except for that tiny little show I did when I just learned how to juggle, was in the intermission of the band in a bar. So we played at bars and at weddings, and
Is this with Lee Hayes or is this with school friends?
This was with Lee Hayes. Yeah, we were called the UFOs. So we had a little business card. We made, we seemed very professional. We had no clue, of course, at the time.
What was the dynamic between you two? Because Lee Hayes, if I'm right in thinking, he's come from America, and he's a experienced showman by this point.
He hadn't done so many shows. No, he was juggling. He had been juggling at a juggling. They had a juggling club at his university, so he'd been juggling a lot and passing. So he had a lot of experience with that. But performing, as far as I remember, I think he had done very few shows. So we kind of both started at the same time. He was 10 years older. He was 25 at the time, and so that was, of course, a different dynamic, which came out more when we started traveling during the summer. We didn't always have the same ideas about things.
Did it show when you were performing? Was there a dynamic of the old knowledgeable guy and the young kid and the upstart, the power relationship as a performance there, or
not as much as no, I can't really remember that. I mean, maybe it was there, but I don't think it was part of our show idea.
Yeah. And what kind of stuff were you doing in the show? Is it just juggling skills, passing, doing more incrementally difficult stuff? Or was there a concept behind it?
We made these juggling routines, and then we just kind of chat a bit, and we really didn't, of course, have much of an idea what we were doing. We were trying our best. We, like most people that start to juggle, start to perform when they're really into juggling, they want to show all their juggling tricks. And of course, the audience is only mildly interested in those juggling tricks. They prefer to see the performer behind it. But we didn't know that, of course. So we were just trying our best and doing all sorts of difficult juggling tricks. But it was working, we were having fun. And we still so when I was still in high school, then it got spring, we started to do some shows on the Leidse Plein, and then the summer holiday, we booked a train ticket. We got this Interrail ticket for a month, and we went to Copenhagen and Switzerland and performed all over the place. And it was great.
How were the street shows? Because with the stage work, if you're good skill wise, you can kind of go out there, I'd imagine, and do 5 minutes, and people will give you a polite clap if you didn't mess everything up. But if you're on the street, I've watched a guy juggle. I think he was doing 7-ball to 9-ball flashes on the street. Really incredibly high level juggling with no one watching him. He'd make, £5 a day. Skills aren't enough from the street, from what I've seen in my lifetime. So how did you guys do when you first started working on the street?
I think we did all right. I mean, we'd seen Cyrus and Birdie the year before, so we sort of knew what you're supposed to do. There were also other performers on the Leidse Plein already showing up. So
were you guys working on the same pitches? Did you queue up together? Did you find your own little spot?
The Leidse Plein was fantastic at that time. It's like nothing I've ever seen, because there was no amplification yet. So you didn't blow out anybody. So the Leidse Plein is not even that big. I mean, it's smaller than Covent Garden, but we could play 5 shows at the same time. So we had just the audience of the back audience of our show would be sort of the back audience of the other show as well. It was packed at the time, so it was just shows and shows going on. So you either have your own spot or share it with somebody else, but never more than 2 on one pitch, and you just do boom, 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 do 3-4 shows in an evening. It was great, and then we all go out to the chess cafe and talk and have a drink, etc. So yeah.
Did you get because when I learned there was a big queue, I learned on the South Bank, and so there'd be 6 or 7 performers on a busy day at the South Bank, and when you'd come off, people would talk to you about what you did and say, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? That didn't work, did it? And it became this learning experience, which then carried on to the bar. Was that the similar kind of thing?
No, not so much. I mean, I've seen a few of your interviews, and I heard that, and I thought like, oh no, we didn't really have that. I mean, we did help each other, but because there was no queue, you didn't really watch. Yeah, sometimes you would watch another performer, but everybody was just kind of, there was no big plan behind it. You just kind of go out there, do your thing, and it's not like when we were done, we would go in the office and sit for 2 hours and think about how to improve our show. We would just go and juggle a bit more, and and you just kind of do it on the spot. You think of something suddenly and you try it, or you see something and you try it, and so there wasn't. I mean, it was very friendly, and people would help each other, but not. It was more the occasional thing, and not like you would see the show and then go, okay, now let's go and help this guy out. Can
I ask you a favor? I don't know, there's something tapping. I don't know whether it's your leg or your hand hitting the table. Maybe it's coming through the microphone.
Yeah, I think I'm doing this a lot. I'll try and be still.
So when you went to the bar after, you can be maybe on the feet. When you went to the bar after, did that kind of chat evolve in the bar after? Were people going, did you see this guy's show? He did this, or was it separate bar talk after? Did you leave the shows behind?
No, we did talk about stuff. Yeah, sure, we did. But there wasn't so much evaluation of a show, so it was just more. Yeah, no, I cannot really remember it like that we were all that was part of the process. I'm sure we did help each other, but.
Yeah, it seems at that point there was less of a formula to a show.
Yeah,
because
totally.
It seems like nowadays there is that set formula, and if somebody comes and does something different, it's not working. People go, "Have you not read the recipe to this?"
No, that's true. There was no formula. Like I said, you just kind of go out there and do it. Because also we hadn't seen that much yet, And now, I know that the formula is there and it works really well. Kind of on the side, you do your thing and then you make money, and I never really thought about how I could make more money doing it. I would just try to do a better show, but the money would just kind of come with it. We didn't really talk about it either.
Well, I'd potentially think it's the detriment of the whole art that we've got a recipe book now, a very strict recipe book. I don't think it's helpful for us. I think it's the reason why we don't have people who come to pitches and stay there all day long to see shows, because once you've seen one, you've kind of seen all of them with different bits slotted into them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's so. Yeah, it's the one trick show was very popular at one point. Just do one big trick and just have 20 minutes of money lines and that sort of stuff. But the funny thing is that it works for the audience, right? The audience is standing there and they're laughing because the money lines are funny and they haven't heard them before. So as a performer, of course, you're not really interested in watching that. I think anyway.
I find it less so now. I've become more experienced.
Yeah. Exactly, and when you see, so you have the performers, and like Peter Post is a performer, or Dirty Fred, and performers love watching them because they don't give a shit, just do their thing, and there is no formula. There's just craziness and fun,
Yes, and so you guys leave the Liza plane, you get your Interrail ticket, and you go around Europe. What's that experience like?
I was 16, so for me it was amazing because just going that I'd never been as far as Copenhagen in my life. The furthest I'd been on vacation was the north of France and Germany, and so Copenhagen was already further than any of that. And we'd met somebody in Amsterdam that invited us to stay there, so we slept there. And you go out to there's a shopping street in Copenhagen, and there's all these people. Some of them we'd met already. Dave Rave, Henrik Botha, they were there. And there's Steve the Rabbit, an amazing ventriloquist. He was so funny. He was a good lesson. It's like watching him do a show. I remember the first time I saw a show. I was performing in the street, right? And I hear this at one point. It's just wave of sound coming from down the street. I'm like, what's that? So I start walking, and it just becomes this roar. But a few times a minute, this roar would just come my way, and I got closer and closer. And there's this huge crowd of this guy, not on the main pitch, but just somewhere in the street, down the street. And so this was Steve, the ventriloquist, and his crowd was just laughing so loud all the time. That was the roar that I was hearing. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And just so, a few times a minute, boom, 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 so consistent. So later on, I talked to him, and he was also a juggler. We were practicing in the park, and he says he taped every show. He would tape every show, go home, listen to his show, find out if there's any gaps, boom, fill it up again. And then so a few weeks later, there might be a gap because a joke's not working anymore, not doing it well, and he would fill it up again. This was like a revelation. I'd never known anybody that would work on his show like that. Not for more than 5 minutes anyway. So yeah, that was and then we go to Switzerland and meet people. Make money. I was 16.
And I could... was it Dave Rabbit? Steve Rabbit.
Yeah.
There's almost this heroic thing with performers, isn't there? This idea that you walk out there without any preparation, and people just kind of ride the wave of chaos. It's almost uncool for someone to go back and watch and study their show and go through everything.
Yeah, cool. I guess you can call it that. It's definitely not something that we were doing. It's like, like I said, we didn't know. When I started performing on the street, I also didn't know that you could do gigs. That you could actually somebody would pay you to fly somewhere and give you a set fee, and you'd fly back home again. I had no idea. None of us had. I remember at one point, Rusty, Shy and Rusty, they were living in Amsterdam, and they did a show together. And Rusty was telling me about this guy. It was Frank Olivier, a performer that had come to Amsterdam as well. And he said, this guy, they just book him to go to Berlin, do one show, and he comes back. I was like, no, we couldn't believe it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so, where's next then after Copenhagen?
Went to Switzerland to Bern. Then also met somebody there, invited us to stay at their house. So it was all, it was so welcoming. And performing in Switzerland, well, it was a discovery. You make good money in Switzerland. So I was like, whoa, this is fun. And we then.
Did you ever get any hassle?
Very little. You mean like hecklers or?
No, I mean like police or security.
No, not well. We'd heard somebody had been to Bern and that you could perform. Like Zurich, we'd heard that there you could get hassled, so we didn't go. Some people went there because apparently in Zurich you could make a lot of money. So some people would just pay the fine and just go again. The fine would double there every time you get caught. Yeah, double your fine. And I think one guy, Eagle, the Bald Eagle or something like that was his name. I think he was already up in the thousands, and he would still go there because he makes so much money. He would just pay the fee or pay the fine and go back to the pit. Yeah, it was crazy. And then we went to Geneva. Cotton and Les were there. Les Bub and Cotton, they were performing on the streets, and fantastic shows. Les Bub, I know he's been mentioned on your show, and he's fantastic. But there, Lee and I got into a bit of a disagreement about performing, and so I said that I wanted to go on by myself. So we parted ways. And
is it too much to ask the content of the disagreement?
Yeah, it's not really that relevant,
Yeah, fair enough.
It was. One thing was that I was younger, so I had a harder time, I think, telling him what I wanted, or like if we had different ideas about a show, I would sort of more easily accept his view, or I was afraid to go against it because I was young and he was older. You know, you have a different dynamic. So I probably bottled it up a bit too long, and then instead of, you know, trying to fix it, I just said, I want to go my own way. That was the solution that I saw.
So you guys are still friends to this day.
Oh yeah,
so it
totally.
doesn't seem like it was too vitriolic.
Yeah. No,
and it's one of the things I find time and time again is when I talk to people who are in double acts, that it's like a marriage. You know, traveling around with someone, working with them all the time, and a lot of marriages, they don't last forever.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we didn't get, I think we were more still in the dating phase because we had only been working together at that time for less than a year, you know. I've since then, like, when I worked with the Flying Dutchmen, obviously we worked so much, and we were always sharing. Well, we weren't sharing hotel rooms, luckily. That was our policy from the start because I knew that would be detrimental. But yeah, you spend so much time together, then it's more like a marriage. But with Lee, it wasn't quite like that yet. No.
Yeah. And so you go off on your own way. You pack your bag, your little stick with a little satchel on there, and walk off into the distance.
Well, actually, I stayed there. He left, and so I stayed there for a bit with Cotton and Les, and it was really fun. And then Cotton went back to Paris, and Les went back to London. And so Les said, if you want to go to Paris, you can stay in my apartment. And so I went also to Paris, and again, I was 16. I had my own apartment. Well, it wasn't my own, obviously, but I had my own place in Paris. I had a friend there, Cotton, so I would hang out at his place every night, and, you know, we get stoned and play music. And, you know, he had this huge music collection. I think he's probably like 5 years older than me, or was. So, you know, he would sort of introduce me to this whole world of music that I didn't know much about. And, you know, I would do shows on the Centre Pompidou, and I had money to go out in restaurants and sit in a bar. For me, sitting in a bar or like at the terrace and have a drink before, you know, was like, you know, when I was young, seemed like a fortune. You know, we didn't have that much money. It wasn't so normal for me to sit down and order a Coke or something. I was like, well, spend $2.50 on a Coke? I could buy 3 liters of that in the supermarket. Why would I sit? And then suddenly it was like, this is fun. You know, I can get used to that.
You gain disposable income.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me at 16, it was luxury. Yeah, for sure.
Did you learn a lot about the process of making a show during that time, making particularly a street show?
I did. Well, I did see a lot of different styles, so that was fun. Like, for example, there was Tony Narbo. He was performing in Paris. He had his own style. He was a clown. He had a unique style, and I remember he told me that the first year or two or so, it wasn't working at all. You know, and he just kept at it and kept at it and kept working at it, and finally he had a show that worked, and it was his own style. That was very impressive because, you know, a lot of us in Amsterdam also, you know, I hear the tapping as well that you're talking about, but it's not me.
Is that me? Maybe that's the rain.
I'm not.
I've got rain coming.
You got the rain.
So maybe I'm going to mute myself when I'm talking.
Yeah, but like in Amsterdam, you know, we would all. Yeah, it wasn't that unheard of to see somebody do a fun bit and then you go, oh, that's fun, and you try to sort of adapt it to your own way. But it wasn't like you're gonna start from scratch and, you know, like Tony Narbo did. And that's the first time I saw Kim, was a Vietnamese guy. He had a huge crowd. He was amazing performer, very powerful. And he did the show where you get volunteers and get them to do things, you know. So I also noticed this is not my cup of tea. This is not what I want to do. I mean, he was very successful and he was very good, but I didn't want to do that. You know, I didn't like the thing of like getting a volunteer and basically making fun of them in a way. You know, it's like he could get away with it because he was very powerful, but it's still, I saw like, oh, you know, I wouldn't want to stand there in place of that volunteer. I wouldn't want to be that volunteer. So, you know, yeah, you get ideas. This is what I want. And Cotton was, for me, an inspiration. You know, I remember also that at one point I noticed, oh, wait, I'm going to be too much like Cotton. I don't want to be that, because he was so powerful as well, that I just, you know, It just sort of
So
glues to you.
you found yourself picking bits up, little bits of talking, structure, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the talking was pretty much, except when you were a mime, but pretty much everybody was talking back then. You know, you would just music, because a lot of people didn't have amps. Sometimes some people, but most people would just talk and juggle. You know, the old school format.
But there's different ways of talking, you know, there's different ways of delivering your words, and there's different ways of when your character plays out there. Some people play very high status, some people play low status, some people have that old uncle, some people have that crazy hippie, you know.
Yeah.
And if you watch a show all the time, I think it's very easy, like you were saying with Cotton, for because you enjoy it so much, for it to slowly merge into your character.
Exactly. And that's, of course, you don't really want that, but also we weren't really too concerned about that at the time. That whole discussion wasn't as vivid, I think, back then as it became later, you know, because we were still so young and beginning, and you know, it is always a discussion, of course. How much can you steal, and how much? What is stealing? You know, what is inspiration? The difference between inspiration and stealing, and you know, it's like I've seen performers that when you see them do something that it's exactly like another performer, like you can see where they get it from. And that's what I don't like personally. So that's also what I was trying to get away from. Then again, when I saw like, oh, I'm becoming like that. I don't want to be like that, you know. Like I remember also another performer who was a very good performer, and he became one of the best street performers that I've seen. But at one point he was so influenced by one particular performer. The Indiana Jones was a French guy who came to the Light Supply in Amsterdam, and he would do one show a day. He would show up and he would say, at 8 o'clock I do a show, and all the performers wouldn't perform then. They would just watch him, you know, and they just, because everybody loved his show. And he would tell the audience, tomorrow I'll be back at 8. So he would, that way he would create a following, you know, and he would get it. So this other performer, he loved him too, and so for a while his show was just like him, you know. And it's like, oh, he's so good, why? But then when he got away from that, and he had taken all that inspiration and he found his own way, he was 3 times as good even, you know. So
well, it's a process, I suppose, of understanding the mechanics, just like juggling, a show, the talk, the patter. There's a mechanical nature to it. There's things which work in there, and if you can understand the cogs that turn, you can put them in a different machine.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. And I think back then the old school style was more like for example, Steve Rawlings, he was talking about how he's got his character, right? So he doesn't talk like a normal person when he does his show. He has this character talk, right? Well, most people back then, for sure, they're not talking like a character. They're just talking like themselves. You know, myself included. I was just me. I was just a young, energetic boy wanting to show my skills, you know, and that's who I was, standing there doing my show, instead of becoming this character and then use that character to make your show. And that's never been me, you know. I've never been. I mean, I've emphasized my character, myself, my own character. I've made it bigger in shows, but I'm not an actor, you know, and I'm not like going to be somebody else and play from there. It would be fun to do that. It's just I don't have the skills for that. I would have to go to school, I think. Back to school.
Yeah. Or at least spend, 5-6 years developing stuff. Just before we move on, there's something really interesting that you said, that you had this friend that spent 2 years developing his own style, his own piece of work.
Yeah.
And when I see younger people now, because I've been doing it 16 years, I've just about got to the point where I can talk to younger people and try and advise from some point of experience. I tell them to do an original show. I say, just try and do your own stuff and keep working at it. It'll be better for you in the long run. But I also feel a bit like I cheat them, because I didn't do that. I looked at the shows, I emulated those shows, and then I did much like you're talking about with the guy who emulated Indiana Jones. That, I started by understanding the other shows and then built my show upon it.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that nowadays? If you had a younger person in front of you and you were advising them, would you be militant either way?
No, I'm definitely not militant because like you say, I've done the same thing, and if I would make a new show, I would probably still do the same thing. It's but when you're young, I think the main thing to do is learn how to perform. So when you sometimes borrow something from another performer, well, if it helps you to learn how to perform, but of course, if you can straight away skip that step and do your own thing and, become a good performer like that, well, that earns you, first of all, the respect of all your fellow performers because you're original. And second of all, you're not a copy. So if you want to sell your show, for example, afterwards, you're not a copy. So you're gonna be so much more successful. But maybe to learn performing skills, yeah, it might be helpful because in the beginning, of course, you're so nervous. You have no idea. You're standing there. How do you get these people? So you're going to say the same thing as everybody else, how to draw a crowd. You're going to just see, oh, I saw this guy lighting a torch to get a crowd. I'll light a torch, oh, there's the audience, at least then you have somebody to play with.
Yeah. So how long did you stay in Paris for then?
I think that was like a week. Yeah, that wasn't too long because I had to go back to school. This was like I was going into my exam year then. So I remember I stayed as long as I could. I think the Saturday night train I took back, Cotton had made me this mixtape of all his favorite music. And I just played it all night on the night train. And I was just so sad that I knew I couldn't go back to performing for another year or almost another year. And I decided...
Kids, just so you know, a mixtape is a Spotify playlist that was held on this tiny little piece of plastic.
Yes, indeed. This was even before the mini disc, huh? And so it's I knew that already then. I decided I'm not going to perform anymore until I'm done with my exams. For the same reason why I didn't want to do more than 1 hour of juggling a day, because I thought once I start that, I want to finish my high school. I've invested 11 years in school. I'm going to do that one more year, and then I'm done. And then I'm going to, perform because I already knew I wanted to do that. And I didn't know it was going to be my job. I just knew that as soon as I was done with high school, I was going to go out there and perform and see what happens. It was no big plan, but that was my plan. Just go out and perform. So yeah, going back to school after that 1 week in Paris, and we still went to the juggling convention. What was that, 85? So we went to the Brussels convention. Back then the conventions were after the summer. Now it's often like in August in the summer holidays because there's a lot more hobby jugglers. But back then there was a lot of like semi-professional jugglers or street performers that would go to the juggling conventions that were still quite small. So you couldn't do it in August because then nobody would show up. Huh?
It was like a trade convention.
No, like a juggling convention.
Yeah, but what I mean by trade is it's a lot of people who are working in the trade who meet up, as opposed to it being, something that you bring your kids along to.
Yeah. No, exactly. It was so you had a lot more professionals. So if you would do it in August, a lot of those people wouldn't be there, and then it wouldn't be as interesting. Your public show wouldn't be as good, obviously, when all the performers aren't there. So anyway, so after the summer holiday, I still did that. I went to that juggling convention, and then I just locked myself in my room. And some of my friends were already, because I was the youngest one in Amsterdam in our little gang, so they were already on the road. Like Mark, the guy who taught me how to juggle, he went to Israel that winter, and of course I was so jealous, but had to finish it. So finished it, and the day after I did my last day of school, I went on the road and started performing, and I became a professional performer on that day, and never stopped.
Where'd you go?
I went, the first day was to Zurich. Because
thought you'd chance getting arrested.
Yeah. I tried it, but it was coincidence. I got there, and there was 2,000 years of Zurich festival going on, which I had no idea, because of course there was no internet. We had no clue what was going on anywhere. And it was a huge amount of people, and I went there with a friend, and I think I did 10 shows in 2 days. I remember we had this big bag of money, and we were just staying in this little tent on a campground, and it's counting our money in the tent, and just leave it there and then go out for dinner. And the only thing that was between that bag of money and somebody else was a zipper, and people heard us count the money and stuff. We were just very lucky that nothing happened. And then, it was a nice start of the tour. And then went to Bern, performed again there, visited the friend that we stayed with before. Then I went to visit, there was l'Institut de Jonglage, as a French group, Tim, Mick, and Susie, and a French guy whose name I can't remember. So I visited them, and then I first went to Ile de Ré with them, an island in France, where they had a gig. So it was the first time that I actually saw somebody do a gig, and then I went to Germany with them, Bielefeld, and they had a festival there.
Just before we go on, when first time you watched someone do a gig, how different was that from what you'd seen before? What struck you about it?
Well, what struck me about it is that they would drive all this way. Especially, Ile de Ré wasn't even that far. They were in Tours or Nantes. They were in Nantes at the time, which is, not that far from Ile de Ré. But Bielefeld was a bloody long way. We're in this car forever. And they did, I think, 2 shows there. So that was the first thing. It's like you go all this way, you do 2 shows, and then you're done. And you go back home again. And they got there, and there was a hotel waiting for them. Wow. And there was catering and everything. And there was an audience, a huge audience, and they didn't have to do it, and they didn't have to pass the hat. They just get a check, and so it was impressive. I was very impressed. It was also a very good show, so that was fun to watch. But
did you see that as thinking, I'll get a piece of this pie? This is something that could work out for me in the future, or were you thinking, no, the street's the way? This is a nice little holiday.
At that time, I still really liked the streets as well, because I really liked the idea of that. As soon as I am done, I just pick up my bag and go, and the whole socializing thing, this was, there was not so much, you weren't hanging out, you do your thing and then you go again. Although I must say later on a lot of festivals you do hang out, but there wasn't that much of it.
Yeah.
But street performing, I definitely really like street performing, but I always remembered it, and it was a very strong impression. So when I started working with Michel with the Flying Dutchmen, I knew this is because there was already festivals in Canada at the time going on, so we did some festivals there. But I was like, Europe, there's a whole market waiting. I've seen that. So it did linger in my mind. But at that time, I was still having too much fun just traveling around and performing on the street.
So you set back out on the road around Europe?
Yeah. I did. I think I did that for another 2 years or so. My first gig was in Japan, I think. I mean, there might have been like a little thing here or there or something, but the first gig was in '87 in Japan.
So this is towards the end of the 2 years. So just before we moved to that, was the things you picked up on the way, was a development in craft that you could share with people, that you understood and learned as you traveled around from place to place, saw different shows?
Yeah, I mean, saw a lot of different shows, and I guess did learn things. It's hard to put my finger on them, what it all was. I saw what I liked myself. Anyway, it wasn't always what I was doing myself, but I saw what I liked myself, and that was like I said, the performer, for example. Dirty Fred was. I saw him in Munich. Munich was a good spot back in the days, and he was performing there a lot. And just watching his show, I could just sit there and watch it over and over again. And the nice thing was also that it didn't rub off on me. It totally wasn't me, So there was no chance that I was gonna take his things.
Well, Dirty Fred's material is quite a hard thing to rub off on anyone. You need a very particular character, I think, to be able to perform.
Exactly.
Kind of stuff.
Yeah. But it's it was so much fun to watch. But you do see like, this guy has his own style, and that's what makes him unique. That's what makes him him. And in a way, I'm also jealous of those people, because some of those people have that, and it's like, I wish I had more of that. That would be nice.
Did you not over the 2 years start defining your own style? Did you start understanding who you were when you were out
I did have my own style, but I don't think it was a style that was standing out as like a particular style. You know what I mean? It's like Dirty Fred had his own style. Like Steve Rawlings had his own style. Even Cotton, even though he was doing tricks and talking and making jokes, he had a very unique style to him as well. He wasn't like a character; he was himself on stage, but he was just a very interesting character, in life as well. So
there's a sense of continuity between the things he's doing, the things he's saying, and who the audience perceives him as being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for myself, I think I was learning that juggling wasn't the peak of interest to the audience. I remember once, you were talking about the guy doing 7 balls and 9 balls and not having a crowd. I remember standing on the light line. I was doing 5 club back crosses, and people just walked by, and then I would pick up a club and I would just twirl it on my finger and talk to people and make little conversations, and in 5 minutes I had a big crowd. And I sort of knew this already, but this was such a good example for myself as well. It's like, I could have also put the club down, but for me, of course, as a juggler, it's nice to have something in my hands and a tool. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was just you making conversation,
Yeah, we're entertainers, not athletes.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you hit Japan then. How did you get this first gig going to Japan? Because it's not even like someone's seen you in a bar and said, hey, come and work at my bar. You've got flown out there, I assume.
Well, there was luckily there was an agent in Holland called Japan Media Exchange, and at the time they were living in Amsterdam. Now they're based in The Hague, and they'd seen me on the light supply performing on the street. So they just came with a handy cam, boom, filmed the show, and it's like, it wasn't even at night because they needed like good light. So they said, just come tomorrow at 2:00. And I was like, 2:00, there's nobody. It doesn't matter. We just gotta film it and send it to Japan. That's all. So I was like, okay. So you come there at 2:00. There's hardly anybody there. They didn't care. They just wanted to see the motions. And so then they sent it to Japan. And then a little while later, got a phone call. So you can go to Japan it was 3 months. And it was a long gig. And then it was actually quite funny because I went there and I got there the last day of the previous performance, and the park was packed. It was totally packed, full of people, great shows. And I was just walking around, and Japanese people came up to me asking me for autographs. And I was like, I was even performing, just because I was white, basically. And I was like, wow, this is going to be fun. And then the next day we started performing, and the park was just deserted because what we were was the last day of Golden Week, and Golden Week is a huge holiday period in Japan. So this, they have a few days where everything is just packed. And so we'd seen that, but we didn't know.
Kind of laughing as they left. So, see you later, guys. Have a nice time.
Well, I don't think they realized how bad it was because they had only seen that part. But it was, so for 3 months, I mean, in the weekend, sure, we had some people, but we were working, I think, 6 days a week. And there was quite a few days.
Fee.
There was no passing the hat. It was just a weekly fee. It wasn't a great fee, but, it was, of course, a trip going to Japan. It was, I loved it. The experience, I loved it, but the experience was too long. So it was got a bit boring.
How did it feel doing the smaller shows?
It was you started to go through the motions. You would go out there. Okay, when so you had the stages and the street pitch. Because it was Holland Village, so there was like they recreate a square. So you perform on the street there. There was a bit better, but on the stage you had just all these benches, and people had to come from far away in to sit on the benches, and when there was hardly anybody there. Sometimes it would be empty. They push you out there, go do your 20 minutes. And then there's nobody there. And you start performing, and like the 2 people that are there just kind of go, hey, come. And then they go, oh, and they walk away. And there's nobody there. And then after 5 minutes, if there was still nobody there, somebody from the staff would come on stage and said, okay, you can stop now. And then you could go back to the dressing room. And sometimes you would sit there for 3 people, or 5 people. You just do your show. So I had a few routines on music that I did there. So I could just, play the music, and you just, do your 3-ball routine or whatever, the devil stick routine. And, it didn't matter so much who was watching. Of course, it's nicer if there's a big crowd, but it wasn't like you needed the interaction for that. But it was also, I guess it was all helpful in forming me to become the performer that in later life, you have these experiences. One thing I learned there, and we because I did another 3 months gig in Korea with Jean-Michel in 1990. And after that one, we decided that we would never do a gig longer than 1 month again. And we didn't. Like, we got offered Cirque du Soleil twice to perform there, and we said, no, don't want to do it. It's too long. One was 1 year and one was 2 years. It was like, nah, it's one, because if we don't like it, then we're stuck. Like in Seoul, we hated that gig, and we knew that. And actually, Dirty Fred came back there because he was performing there before us. We were sort of doubting, shall we go there or not? So we were at the House of Japan Media Exchange, who was also organizing that gig. They said, well, why don't you talk to Dirty Fred? Ask him. So we talked to Dirty Fred, and he said, oh, it's fun. Come over. So he had left by the time we got there, and we hated it. So I think I wrote him a letter or something, and he said, oh, no, I hated it, because we found like these notches on the door, where he marked the days that were left. And it was just like oh, yeah, well, what could I say? The agent was in the same room. It's like, of course I had to say it was fun. It's like, yeah. So
I remember seeing Dirty Fred. I remember seeing Dirty Fred for the first time on the South Bank, and he went out and he started doing his routines to nobody.
Right.
I was like, Fred, what are you doing? Why are you doing your stuff to no one? And he went, oh, when you do the festivals, you get used to doing stuff to no one. You just get through it. Just do your thing.
Just do your thing, yeah. It's true. Well,
so when you came, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
When you came back from Japan, did you go back on the street, or did you think, right, I'm going to try and get more gigs?
No, I was doing the streets and loving it. This was 1987. I think that's. Oh yeah, I'm skipping 1986 because that was a really fun year too. 1986 was, first of all, the Kaslar juggling convention that you've heard people talk about, which was amazing. But before that,
Is that where you started getting called Mozart?
No, that was after Sand. That was after Sand. Yeah, I remember I saw that picture that you put on Facebook, and I was like, oh yeah, that article. That's from a long time ago. But that was after that was after 87. Now, in 86 was the first time I also showed the Mills Mess at a juggling convention. I think that sort of put my name on the map in the juggling world at the time. There was a few good jugglers. There was Haggis. This is, you also have the circus circuit, which is there was fantastic jugglers in the circuit. They just wouldn't go to the juggling convention. So at the juggling convention,
they wouldn't share the stuff, right? Old circusy guys, they treat it like magicians treat their stuff.
Yeah,
you don't give people's stuff away.
Yeah, I remember going actually to a circus school. They were doing an exhibition in a theater here nearby, and I was, I think, 15. I just started to juggle, and there was so we went. There was like an open day, and there was these guys juggling there, and there was one guy had cigar boxes, and I was like, "Whoa, I'd never seen cigar boxes. Cool. Where do you buy those?" And he was like, "I'm not gonna tell you that." I was like, oh, okay. And because his teacher was like an old school circus performer, he was like, yeah, these are our secrets and everything. But I've also, circus has completely changed, of course, in the last 30 years. And that part has changed a lot as well. But just to say that just because we were good jugglers at the juggling scene doesn't mean that worldwide we were like so hot shit. We weren't good, but Sergei Ignatov was amazing. He just wouldn't show up. He did show up in Oldenburg for the first time in 1990. But so the Haggis McLeod I met there for the first time, and the Butterfly Man and Charlie Brown, and it was really fun. It was a magical juggling convention. But before that, I went to London. So I performed in London once in Covent Garden, And I actually, hey, look, check this out. See that? This I found in the mail of my father, because he recently passed away, and I was going through his stuff. And this is
Wow.
a postcard that I sent him, and it says, "Hi, Dad. I'm here in London, and I'm going to Edinburgh soon for a festival. To perform here in London, you need a license, and you need to get up. You need to get your name on a list at 7 o'clock in the morning. I hate it. I'm leaving." That's what I mean. London was really fun, but to have to get there at 7 o'clock in the morning to put your name on a list, I'd quit my newspaper job after I did my first juggling show and made my first 50 guilders because I hated getting up early, So I was like, okay, this is not for me. And you had people sitting there in vans. They lived next to the spot, in London, and they would just, set their alarms, look at 7. Boom, put their name on the list, go back to sleep in their van. And I was staying at Les Bub's place, and I had to get the tube for an hour, to get there. So I was never first on the list. I was like, this is. But Edinburgh was fantastic. Yeah.
What was Edinburgh like back then?
Well, first of all, there was a fantastic group of people, of performers. Paul Morocco was there, Chris Lynham, Cotton, David Lichtenstein, I think, Charlie Brown, I think, Squeaky the Clown. There's a whole bunch of people, Magical Michael. And so you had the Mount. I haven't been there since, but there's the Mount where we were performing, and that was, it was fun. Everybody was doing their show. But the best thing was Fringe Sunday, which back then was in a park, and I believe it's not there anymore.
But it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, it was just so many people, and it was a big park. So everybody, you could do. I think I did 5 shows or something there. You could do as many shows as you want. And there was no amplification. Nobody had mics. So one show I remember, I was making it so big, and I would have to run to one side of the audience, and I would yell a line, and then I would run to the other side and yell the line, do the trick, and then yell another line and run to the other side, yell the line, do the next trick. It wasn't a great show, of course, because the timing wasn't perfect with the lines and the tricks, but it was an experience. But just the English money is so heavy as well, huh? Compared like Swiss money, you have like 500 Swiss franc. It's a little bag. You have 500 Swiss franc in pounds, and it's like a shopping bag. So so Squeaky had his van there, and everybody would just, after a couple of shows, you just had to dump your money in there because you couldn't walk around with it. I had just a little bag with my juggling stuff, and it was too heavy to carry. And at the end of the day, we're all in an apartment, and we're all just had these piles of money, and we're just grinning and going like, that was a good day. It was fun. Just the social thing was amazing. Everybody just hanging out and going out to eat together and going to theater shows together. It was fun.
It sounds a lot that's changed over the time, but it seems like the social thing is still the same. It's what I enjoy about Edinburgh, is you go there and you see so many people who you love, who you don't see the rest of the year, and you get to hang out with them, chat with them. You see different shows, interesting shows you wouldn't see. It's almost like a street performers convention.
Yeah,
I feel.
Yeah. I've heard about that, and I've met quite a few people who have gone there, and you should come over. But yeah, it's in August. That's the gig season. Yeah. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
So what happened to you in 87 then? You say you jumped over 86. So 87, you go to Japan. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I went to Japan in 87. Then let's see. I made a few notes. Let's see if I can still find it here. Oh, this is 87. Oh no, 86. Oh, there is no 87 in my notes. I just forgot to write down 87. Oh, Duncan Trillo, he was in Japan. I think quite a few performers in England know him. He was at that. I think that was one of his first gigs as well. The Sand Juggling Convention and the Zurich Theater Spectacle. That was another thing that I started for the first time in 87. And that was sort of like performers convention as well. It's at the end of the season, a bit in September or so, early September. And so everybody was sort of gathering there, and you couldn't do that many shows because there was so many performers there, but you would just hang out at the lake and swim and talk and, enjoy some time together, because sometimes you would be on your own for a while, gigging around. So yeah, that was really fun. And I basically, after that, I started to get ready to go to Key West. I went on a trip to the States for the winter 87, 88.
Why did you decide to go to Key West?
Well, I wanted to go to Hawaii. I met Graham Ellis in '86 at the juggling convention in Castelar. But that year I didn't go because I was planning to go to Israel already. I went the winter of '86 to Israel to perform there.
Why go to Israel to perform?
Well, mainly because my friend Mark had been there the year before and he liked it, and I knew a few people in Israel, and several performer friends of mine had been there already. My brother was there at the time in a kibbutz, so I could visit him. And it's a warm place. I mean, basically, you're looking for a warm place to perform on the street. And it was really fun. I was staying with a friend, Ron, in Tel Aviv, and performing at the Dizengoff Street. And I remember Gazo talking about these card Monty, like the 3 card Monty that he did. Yeah. And there was people doing that there as well. And I would when I would perform, of course, I would get a crowd, and they wouldn't have that many people, so they get pissed off and tell me to go away, and I will kill you if you don't go, and if you come back tomorrow, we'll kill you. And so I would come back the next day, perform, and then well, he's still there. Bummer, that didn't work. And then we got friends, So I would go to I would watch their thing, and sometimes I would put money on it because I started to figure out how they were. I didn't know all their tricks, but I knew a few simple tricks after watching it over and over again, and then. So I would try and put some money on it, and sometimes I would beat them. Sometimes they would take my money, and it just became a friendly thing. And they would come and see my show, and it was fun. It was a little rough sometimes.
Is it into the hazing? Because on some pitches you go to, other performers will give you a hard time to try and get you to leave because they don't want to share the pitch with you. So it's a similar kind of thing to that.
Yeah, it was definitely, and it was the first time I experienced it as well. I couldn't remember anything like that before. Everywhere you go, you're in it together, and you share a pitch, or you go down the street if it's too busy. And here, they weren't street performers, obviously. They were hustlers, and con men too, obviously, because that's the trick, right? They con you out of it. And but it was fun anyway to perform. And back then I didn't have a unicycle. I just had a little bag that's like for when I was performing on the street. I could just have this tiny. So I would go to the cinema, bring my bag of clubs and torch and stuff, and go out and go like, oh, there's all these people, do a show, So it was so flexible, just go around. Then I went
by having a small kit.
Yeah. I mean, of course, back then I knew already because there was performers with unicycles. You have a unicycle, you make more money, but then you had to carry the unicycle around, and that wasn't at the time. That wasn't my. Later, I carried a lot of unicycles around, but at that time, no. I was happy to travel light. And I went to Eilat in the south of Israel. And a friend of mine, Frank van Dijk, came there, and we made a show together, and we performed in the hotels. So they would give us room and board and a little bit of money, and we would do like one show a week or so.
Would you just rock up to the hotels and ask them, or would you call up hotels before? How do you get those gigs?
Yeah, for some reason we thought we should try and do that, or maybe somebody said, "Oh, you should go to the hotel." So we just go over there, and is there anybody here that takes care of entertainment? So yes, there was an entertainment manager. We did the Sonesta Hotel, and we just said like, "Oh, we have this show," and I said, "Okay, yeah, you can move in." He hadn't seen anything. He just said, "Okay, you get a room there." So we had this room and this 5-star hotel, and
Was that could have been awful?
It could have, exactly. He had no idea. He was just like, "Oh, this, come on in." And I think we stayed there for like 5 days before we did our first show. And so we had those 5 days in the pocket, but he liked it, luckily. So we stayed for a few weeks and did that when we did a diving course in the Red Sea. And, it was
well, there you go, young performers. If you want to travel around on the cheap.
Yeah, exactly. The hotels was, and we did there, and then we went to other hotels, and there we would do it ask for some more money because we didn't have to stay there, and so we did different hotels and gigs, and that was an experience. It was fun.
And so it's after this you go to Key West.
In '87, the year after, so I was on my way to Hawaii. So I booked this ticket: Key West, Hawaii, San Francisco, back home. And in Key West, I have no idea how I knew this, but there was a festival there. Will Soto had organized, I think, the first Key West Street Performance Festival or something like that. And my friend Mark was there as well. So I went there. There was a lot of great performance. Cyrus was there again, Birdie, but also Waldo and Woodhead show, Tom Murphy, the Butterfly Man, Scotty and Joan, Mookie. I think you've had Mookie on the show as well. Mookie was there.
Yeah, we had him on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so it was fun. Again, I think, what was I, 18? I turned 19, I think, there. So everything was just an adventure. And Key West is a beautiful place, sunny. It's winter at home, and here I am swimming in the ocean.
You're incredibly young as well. You say you're still just hit 19 by this point. You've lived a life that most people haven't done by the time they're 30.
Well, traveling back then was a bit different than now. So traveling was quite special, so to say. Now, of course, you go anywhere. You go to New York to go shopping for a weekend. But back then, that was an adventure, for sure. So how was Key West different from all the other places you visited? Because you've been to Covent Garden, you've been to lots of places, you've been to the majority of the biggest pitches in Europe by the sounds of it by now. So how's Key West different from that? It was quite different. For one thing, it was a bit more regulated, I think, and it was like Will Soto. He lived there, so he was the king of the pitch, and he had his own pitch, and you wouldn't touch
he's
that.
A rope walker, right?
Yes, slack rope, and so that was his thing. You wouldn't go there, and the locals, of course, they knew Gazo was there as well, and they knew the ropes, and so you sort of had to get your pitch by sort of smooching your way in there with the locals. I knew Cyrus because I met him when I was 15, and so I would do some shows with him. He would always get people and do duo shows with them, and so
people are quite territorial there then.
At that time, yeah, it was quite territorial. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like you weren't allowed to go there, but it was also not like, okay, we all have equal rights. You sort of had to fight your way in there and make sure you...
And what would happen if you, maybe you didn't see it, but maybe you heard about it? What would happen if someone didn't do it in the right way? What happened if someone went in there and sort of didn't know the protocol, so to speak?
I have no idea. I think you would just leave at one point. I mean, the locals were pretty, they were pretty adamant about this is how we do it here, and if you don't like it, go. But I knew a lot of them already, so it was not that difficult to get to perform there.
And did you enjoy performing there?
Yeah, sort of. It wasn't. I liked Europe better. Up to then, Europe had been my experience in Japan.
Is there a clear reason why that you can remember?
I think people came there for the sunset. That was, and of course, there was also all the performers. So you could do really well there. It was just, I don't know. At that time, I didn't feel like I was really connecting too much with the audience. I mean, I had fun shows, I had a good time. But I felt more at home, I guess, in Europe, playing with the audiences there than in Key West. And yeah, it's hard to put my finger on it. It's also, of course, 32 years ago. It's a long time ago. But it was fun, and but the festival was more fun. When the festival started, then it was not at the pier; it was in the city. Or several things were in the city, and that was more fun. It seemed like there was more what I was used to, this sort of street there where you get the ambiance. Also the ocean, it's sort of an energy sucker, I guess. The ocean is right behind you. There's just this vast mass of water. There's nothing, blocking it. So I don't know. It's maybe that was what made it different.
And so, why go to Hawaii?
Well, I met Graham Ellis in Castellar, and he was raving about Hawaii. And there was quite a few performers there who had bought themselves. There's Belly Acres, piece of land. Like Aileen was on your show; she lives there, and so Dave Rave and Henrik and Stevie G, they were all part of that land already. Charlie Brown. So it just sounded like a fun place. I mean, Hawaii, who doesn't want to go to Hawaii? It's like from postcards. It's from Elvis Presley. It's this beautiful island in my idea. And it was a beautiful island. So there was a juggling convention there. What better excuse can you have to go to Hawaii than a juggling convention? So why not go there?
A lot of the best jugglers in the world, by sounds, a lot of the best entertainers in the world, on the street at least, by the sounds, live there.
And like what's his name? This famous magician. He was supposedly always showing up. The name is there, but I can't come up with it. And Waldo and Woodhead would go there, and Paul Morocco was there that year as well, I think, or maybe that was later. And Butterfly Man. So it was just it just sounded like it would be a fun place to be, and it was great. I loved it.
And so did you stay there for a few days, for a week?
I think the first time I stayed probably for about 3 weeks or so. Like a week before, then a week convention, a week after.
Haggis and Ken say Jeff McBride.
Jeff McBride, yes, thank you. Ken and Haggis. There's some people there. Cool.
If anyone wants to say hello in the chats, we will see it. There you go. How long did you stay there for?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. And did you go straight back to Europe after that?
No, I went to San Francisco, and then staying with Charlie Brown, who lived at the time in San Francisco. I mean, he was a member in Hawaii, but he wasn't living there. And Butterfly Man, of course, went to go. Pier 39 went there. I didn't perform there. I was just hanging out there and having fun in the social scene there. It was quite a social scene of performers in San Francisco at the time, watching Butterfly Man perform. And I'd seen him perform at a juggling convention in Castellar, but not as a regular street show. So that was of course.
Was it very different watching a convention show from Robert Nelson and watching him work on the street? Because I've heard he was a force on the street. A lot of the lines that we use now, a lot of lines that are used now come from him.
Yeah, he was definitely a force, and at least he definitely claims that all that material is his, and he's probably right. But the difference at a juggling convention was like the first time I saw him perform he was a heckler. He was heckling somebody else, and we didn't have hecklers back then, at least not on the mainland. I think in England, yes, there was lots of heckling, but in the mainland, nobody heckled anybody. Maybe you had a drunk guy, but like to have a fellow performer heckle you, it's like, what's that? So there was a guy performing, and he started to heckle the guy. And in Castellar, Haggis says, in Castellar, he performed in a prison. Yes, I think Aileen told that story as well. He did perform in a prison, but that was also not his regular street show, Haggis. That was a prison show. He was whacking the shit out of the warden with a foam rubber sword and causing a riot. That was fun. Yeah. But yeah, so he was heckling this guy who was performing a show. I think a gentle German juggler or something. Who had no idea what was coming to him. And then Butterfly just starts hacking into him, and the whole audience is just going, "What's this guy doing? Why is he being so rude?" And we just, "Boo! Sit down! Who are you? Sit down, you evil man!" Just getting shit from the whole audience, and then he would walk on stage because he's the Butterfly Man. He was probably high as well, and he would just start ranting, and we didn't have a clue. He was just, at one point he just kind of walked off, and I was like, okay, That's it.
Ranting. Was he just saying you're an asshole, or was there a purpose to his rant? Was he artistically challenging what was going on?
I artistically, no, it wasn't. It wasn't like he was criticizing the guy in a heckling sort of way. He was just heckling for the sake of heckling, you know. And later on, of course, when I've seen his show and when I'd been to England and know that heckling there was quite an art form as well, and probably still is. I understood more what he was doing. But most of us, we just saw as a guy who disturbed somebody. You know, why are you breaking his concentration? You know, that was the idea that most people had. But he was probably just being a good heckler. We just didn't know what that was. Yeah.
Well, there is this idea that you should be able to deal with a heckler. If someone gives you crap, the highest form of respect is then to be able to deal with the crap given in a way which deals with that person, means everyone likes you even more.
I think that idea probably comes from England, because we didn't have that in. I mean, yes, there was this thing like if there would be a drunk guy or something. Like I remember, for example, Dave Rave and Henrik Bote, they were performing together, and I saw them in Copenhagen in '86. And this drunk guy was heckling them, and they dragged him out of the crowd. At first, Dave smashed a guitar on his head. That was one way of dealing with the heckler. Then they dragged him out of the crowd and handcuffed him to a fence. And then they came back, finished their show, which was, of course, not as it was supposed to be anymore. And then the police came, and they couldn't find the keys to the handcuffs, so they had to go get, clippers or whatever. And so it was quite messy. And another time in Amsterdam, there was this drunk lady junkie who was heckling them. Like not heckling like the sort of heckling you can't do anything with, basically. It's like, so they took duct tape and taped it all around her long hair and pushed her out, and then she came back again. Somebody had untied it. It must have been really painful. And then this big bodybuilder guy just walked up, lifted her up, and just took her out of the crowd and left with her, and so they could finish their show. So it was a different way of dealing with hecklers on the mainland. I think that in England, like it was more verbal. I remember performing in Norwich. Ken organized that juggling convention in Norwich, and I was gonna do a juggling bit in the tent, and there was Pee-wee. Pee-wee was the MC, and he's very good. You know Pee-wee by any chance? He's
not personally. I've heard of him, but I don't know him personally.
Yeah, and well, he's very good verbally, and so he was the MC, and he would just say something, and then he got heckled by one, and it would just like this whole thing bouncing around the crowd of people yelling stuff, and everybody was laughing, and then he would say something again, and it was just going on and on. But the thing was, like, my English is pretty good, but I had no idea what they were talking about, because it was just like this, and of course when it's your native language you pick it up, but for me I couldn't really hear it. So I was just saying to Pee-wee, it's like, you just gotta tell them to shut up when I'm juggling, because they can start saying things but I have no idea what they're saying, so what am I going to say back? So he asked them like, oh, okay guys, shut up now. And I was like, did my juggling thing, and they were quiet. I was like, thank you thank you for not heckling me.
I think that's the whole thing to that, is that they're not doing it to ruin the experience. Good hecklers, it's playful, it's interactive. It's this idea that we're giving you something to play with. See what you can do with this. Show us how clever you are.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, once you start performing more and you start to learn more about that, it can be really fun. The thing is, of course, when a heckler goes on too long, once you've done, especially, when they're not performers, when they're just regular people and somebody's messing with you and you're messing with them, and it's a fun thing, and it's like you have mutual respect in a way, also the guys. But then when he just keeps going, or she just keeps going, and it's just like after a while you're just like, okay,
usually very drunk people,
shut up, I can't work like this, so
the show isn't me and you, it was an interlude. Let me move on.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be great, of course, because it's always different. So that can make it really fun. But when it's just like a senseless heckling. Hi, Steve. Nice to see you. See Steve Rollins there. Now I look to the right every now. And Brian Hulse is there as well. Hi, Brian. And Ivan. Cool. Hi, Jennifer. Hi.
So when I read some stuff, I think it was '89 was a juggling convention where there was lots of big buzz about you. Am I right in thinking that when there's a lot of articles? Have I got the date right for that?
89 was in. Oh my god. 89 was in. No, that was in Maastricht. No, it was 87. 87 was there was a woman, an American woman. She was sort of a journalist, I think, and she wrote an article for the IGA magazine, the American Juggling magazine. So I think that was the first time. I mean, my name had been mentioned here and there, like, oh, he won the 5-ball competition or something like that, like after Castelar. But that was an article, in the magazine. So that was, and also there I got scouted or spotted, how you say that, by the Monte Carlo Circus Festival. So they were organizing a new festival, not their big festival, but they were organizing a festival for circus schools. So they said, well, why don't you come and perform there? And so I went, but I said, like, I'm not in the circus school. So they said, oh, that's a problem. So we made up. I was part of the Cirque. What was it? L'École de l'Art de la Rue d'Amsterdam du Cirque or something like that. It was like, the street performers circus school of Amsterdam. So then I could go there, and that was. I mean, it was funny. That was the first time for, I think it was 4,000 people or something in that tent. It was huge. It's the big circus tent that they have. That they have the big festival in as well.
How did it feel in front of so many people?
Scary but fun. It was amazing because I didn't have a clue about circus. I went there, like, they'd seen me perform in Sand. In Sand, I was on the stage and I had no music. I would just say to the band, just play something, just improvise, and I'll just juggle to whatever you play. That was my way of performing at a juggling convention, not talking, you just do your juggling stuff. So when I was in contact with them, I said, like, well, I don't have any music, so I need some time. We can play with the band, we have 1 or 2 hours together and we'll figure it out. They said, okay. So I get there and then they say, oh, we don't have time for that. We have no time for the band to do that. So we'll just have this tape here. So they just put on a tape, and I was wearing this thing that I'd bought in Japan, like a black kimono with a dragon on the back and just black pants and some all-star sneakers that everybody was wearing back then that was performing. If you weren't wearing all-stars sneakers, you weren't a performer, basically. And just juggling, but the people liked it. I won 2 prizes and a contract in the second biggest casino in Monaco. But when I went there to see what it was like, they said, oh, come and check it out. There was like 8 people watching this big variety show with dances and everything, and the ceiling was probably 2.60 meters or something, or 50, so not much. It was about this much, 2 feet above my head. And the juggler was there.
You're not juggling numbers.
No, well, Nino Ferdiniani or something, is really good juggler, was there, but he's like 5 foot tall himself, so he had plenty of space above his head. And I saw him juggle. I was like, that's not me. I don't even have a show. I just juggle. I don't have this circus, this variety show. And I don't want to be here either. I don't want to perform for 8 people. I think 3 of them were call girls. It's like, this is not my kind of audience. So it's like, nah, I'm just back to the street. That was more fun. Yeah.
And was this before or after Hawaii?
Good question. This was just before. This was in November.
So what do you do after Hawaii then? Or after San Francisco, I should say.
After San Francisco, went back to Europe, and then I had another gig in Japan, back in that same place again, but this time in the busy period. So I got to enjoy the
Golden Week.
Yeah, I got the Golden Week, exactly. And that was fun too. I met the Gizmo guys for the first time. Oh no, it wasn't the first time, but I met them again. Barrett Felker and Alan Jacobs, both amazing jugglers. And also they were. I remember Alan Jacobs saying, "We think we're the most professional performers here." And I was like, oh, well, why is that? It's like, well, they were giving all these, and one thing was their costumes, and they were right. My costume was I was just wearing at that time a shirt and pants, and the shirt was just whatever I thought was a bit colorful in the shop. And they had these costumes made, tailor made, and their shirt, their button shirt, how when I was wearing it, it would always come out in my pants, right? It just, when you're moving, but they had it made so that it would have buttons underneath their underwear, and there was some from both sides, and you click it closed and it always stays tight. And I was like, wow, you actually thought about that? That's a great idea, that you give that thought and everything. So that it was a fun, really nice. This was the busy period, so there were tons of performers, and it was really fun.
And the shows are big. You weren't just going through the motions this time.
No. This was definitely nice. And one of the things that I always enjoyed also is languages. So whenever when I'm in Germany, I perform in German. When I'm in France, I perform in French. When I'm in Italy, I perform in Italian. And in Japan, of course, I had to learn Japanese, not to speak it fluently, but just my show text. So
so you learn kind of a script.
Yeah, I just. The fun thing is, of course, Japanese is quite a different language. Then it doesn't have the same structure, and also they don't have the same humor. So you have your show script, you're like, okay, this is what I say here, and you have your translators there, so they translate it. You learn it by heart, which takes a long time, and then you try it, and nobody laughs, and you're going, oh shit, that didn't work. So then you go back to the translator, and said, what exactly am I saying? And then they translate it, and sometimes you go, oh, okay, that's not what I wanted to say. That's not the intention, or whatever. Or sometimes they're just being polite and they don't want to be rude or whatever, but they don't tell you that. So you have to figure it out while you're doing it. But meanwhile, of course, it took you a couple of hours to learn it, to learn a few lines again. But then slowly, you figure it out, and then it starts to work. And then the fun thing is that it's a different show in a way. It's not the same show as when you're doing it in German, or when am I doing it in Holland, or.
I spoke to Brian Hulse about this, and we have his interview. We had a few technical issues with his interview. His interview will be going back up really soon, so everyone check it out if you're interested in learning Japanese. The guy said exactly the thing you said. He said he went there and everyone told him that you can't be funny in Japanese. People just don't laugh to it, and then had to go through the process of going. He went to school for years to learn how to do this thing.
Well, Brian Hulse, I think, is the master in Japan. He learned. He learned to speak very, very good Japanese, like fluent Japanese. And he actually, when we went to Shizuoka in '93, he was there. And this was the year we won the Shizuoka World Cup that year. And like, he was giving us lines, he was saying, oh, you should try this, or you should try that. Or, if you say it like this is like the Osaka slang, from the other city. They love it when you use Osaka slang, so instead of saying it like this, you say it like this intonation, and then it sounds like you're some old guy in Osaka. So he helped us get some good extra laughs there.
The local knowledge.
Yeah, and he's a very good performer, but his language skills there made him very, very popular, for sure.
Yeah, and so it sounds like during this journey, doing the Golden Week, that you learn about costuming. I take it that was something you took away. Did you buy a costume when you left Japan after that? Did you think, right, I've got to change the way I look?
No. No, I stayed the way. It's it's the same thing as like I said, when I take my little bag and I go to the cinema. It's like I always liked to sort of blend in and then just start performing with whatever. So what I was wearing should not be too different. It should be possible that I was just, walking down the street and not going to perform with these clothes. I mean, later on with the Flying Dutchman, we had costumes that I would not want to walk down the streets with if I wasn't going to perform. You would feel very self-conscious. But so, so that at that time I was still more into just, free floating and doing it.
Did you hit Europe again?
Yeah. I went. Also I went to Europe, but also to Halifax the first time, because in Key West, the organizer of the Halifax Festival was there. So he invited me to come to Halifax, and this was in August, I guess, the Halifax Festival.
And what was the Halifax Festival? Was it a 3-month thing, like what you did in Japan the first time?
No. This is I think back then it was 10 days. 2 weekends.
And is it all in Halifax, on the one city, or is it moving around? Or?
Well, yeah, all in Halifax. There was one place across the water in Dartmouth, but that was just one pitch. But now they have it mainly at the waterfront, but back then it was all downtown. It was huge. I mean, I think they had 600,000 people or something. It was the biggest street festival in Canada at the time, and I think even in Europe, there's not many festivals that I know of that have so many people. It was huge, and there was so many performers too, and all the great performers that, from Northern America, like Waldo Woodhead, what they won that year, and Gazo was there, and Brian Hulls was there, and tons of people, Dave Rave, Henrik Bote, David Aiken, you name them, they were there. It was a trip, it was the first time I did a festival like that. I'd done the Japan gig, completely different, of course, and this was like a street festival that I did lots of them afterwards, but this was the first time I
and you said that somebody won the festival.
Yeah, it's a competition.
See, most of the festivals I see nowadays aren't competitions, or the ones that I know of. There's very few that I see that are competitions. Was this a very prevalent thing before? Perhaps it's something prevalent now, and I'm just ignorant to it.
Well, the guy who Dale something, who was the organizer of the festival, he figured, I'm gonna put out a first prize of 10 grand, and that way I don't have to pay anybody, because they'll come because everybody thinks they will win the 10 grand. And he paid for transport, and you would stay in the dorms of a university, but besides that there was no fee, so you just do your show, and it worked great. I mean, everybody came there, everybody thought like, yeah, I want to win that 10 grand. So and he had a sponsor, I think the TV channel or something, so the money was no problem. So and
the hats as well, right? So you're making money doing
the hats were definitely good. So it was a good deal all around, except that, of course, I think Matt talked about that. Competitions don't bring out the best in performers. It's, even though all the performers are saying like, oh, I don't care about the competition and la la la, there is always, in my experience anyway, what I felt, there's always this little undertone during a festival where there is money to be made. Dale Thompson, yes, Brian Hulls, you have a good memory. He was the first producer of that festival. So there's always a thing, because everybody, of course, wants to win that prize. You want to walk away with that 10 grand. And personally, I must say, I did not think I was going to win that money. There was fantastic performers, the Waldo Wood and show Gazo. I was just happy to be there. But I felt it afterwards as well. When I know that I don't want to be influenced by the competition, I would still rather win it than lose it, And of course, especially if there's money involved, that's when it becomes even more important. That's when you feel even more that it's like, oh, are you on that pitch again? Wait, that's a good pitch, and this is the second time you played it. That's not fair, because then you'll get more votes, because it was a People's Choice Award. You get a bigger crowd, you get more votes, etc., etc. So, but anyway, besides that, it was an amazing festival to experience, because it was so new for me to have it like that. And it's also where I met. This was in 1988, and it's where I met Jean-Michel for the first time. Although he said he met me before in Santa, the juggling convention, but I couldn't remember. But we met there for the first time, and how we started performing together was also there, because I had the really good pitch one night in front of the church, and this was also, again, nobody had amplifiers yet, so I had done, I think, 4 shows on that pitch. It was a huge pitch, it was a beautiful pitch, so you just want to keep working there basically till you drop dead. And I'd done 4, and I was so tired, and using your voice, it's like, and he rides by with his 3 unicycles. He sits on his little unicycle, and he pushes his 6-foot and his 9-foot unicycle, and he comes by, and I say, hey, there's this crowd waiting, and I'm beat, but maybe if we do a show together, it's not so exhausting, and let's try it. So he said, okay. And he got some of his other stuff, and we just improvised the show there. And it was fun, and it went well. And Dale Thompson, the organizer, was there, and he came up to us and said, if you gonna perform together, you can come back next year. And I was like, oh, that's a nice compliment. And also, it turned out that my present wife, Maaike Arden, she was in that audience as well. She'd seen our first show together, and so that was nice coincidence. But
did it feel like when you started working together that it gelled? Was there a sense that there was going to be this huge career spouting out ahead of you two?
Well, not at that time, because he was still working with another guy, Jonathan Seglins, but I asked him. I said, look, I have this gig in Japan coming up for 11 weeks or 9 weeks next year in '89, and I don't want to go along. I'd done this tour in '88 in Italy by myself, and I was just going to all these places by myself, on the train there. I didn't have a driver's license yet. On the train there. I was just getting a bit bored traveling by myself. So I thought, like, I wouldn't mind having a partner. So I said, like, I'm doing this, but you're working with him. So, it's, and he said, yeah, but I don't want to, I want to stop that show. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, in that case, do you want to come to Japan? And he goes, yeah, sure. So we did. I think we didn't perform there anymore in Halifax, because he was still working with Jonathan. So he did the festival, of course, with him. But then we went to Toronto. We did a couple shows together. I think that was that year. And then I didn't see him for 6 months. And we went to Japan. I talked to my agent. I said, I have this gig next year with you. I don't want to go alone. I found a partner. He said, he's Canadian. I go, oh, but it's a Dutch festival. It was for some celebration, some Dutch celebration. So that's a problem. The producers want Dutch people. I said, oh, well, how about we make a Dutch name? And she goes, well, okay, that could work then. It's like, well, how about the Flying Dutchman? And she goes, yeah, okay. So our name was made up in 2 seconds. Of course, it's an existing name, but it was we didn't have to think long about that. And he came to Amsterdam a few days before we flew to Japan. We didn't really have a show. We'd done that little improvising bit there and maybe 1 or 2 shows in Toronto, but we had no idea what we were going to do there, especially because also we couldn't talk yet. We still had to translate everything. So we just wrote down our skills and we just put little crosses. Like I think I did a 3-ball routine while he was on a unicycling playing saxophone. The lines ended up like that, so we would just try it out. But in a few days we had a show together, and that was basically the basis of our show for the next 30 years.
Wow. And when you were building the show together, did you have a concept of your roles within the show? Because although I've managed to catch little bits and bits and stuff, I've obviously not managed to see the show live myself, so I don't really know the dynamic between you two well.
Well, like I said before, the way I was used to making shows is that you're just you, and you're gonna play out whoever you are on stage. And so, but pretty soon, it was obvious that we were quite different in character. He's more like the goofy guy, the August clown, so to say, if you want to take it traditional, and I was the white-faced clown. So that was nice, something to hold on to, because it was easy to emphasize that, because I'm who I am, so I can just make that a little bigger, and he could make his thing a little bigger, and that way we could play off each other really well. So that was, like you were talking about, gelling, did it gel right away? That was the thing. I think that, I didn't realize that at first, people had to tell me basically at one point, oh, I see this. And I go, oh, really? Oh, yeah, I see that. Oh, really? Okay. And, but then that's why it gelled, because it's from the beginning we had that already, and we just had to sort of make it a little bigger,
What was the first gig in Japan like then? For you two working together, the experience?
It was a pretty awesome gig, because it was 9 weeks. It was also we met Peter Post, Mr. Jones. Have you had Mr. Jones on yet? No,
not yet.
No, he would be a fun one. He's a great guy, and Mrs. Jones was there as well. They had a Mr. and Mrs. Jones show, and great people, and there was a band and a few other performers. So it was a nice group of people. There was also Dutch students that were working there. Because they learned they studied Japanese, so they could speak a little Japanese in that festival that they had created there. And so we didn't know this, but we could pass the hat there. So we had this fee, but we said like, oh, can we pass the hat? And they said, yeah, sure, why not? That could be a fun thing, a foreigner passing a hat. So we were like, okay, sounds good to us. So we made good money, and especially the Golden Week was also in that 9-week period, and we did, I think, about 100 shows in 10 days. It's like literally
in 10 days.
Yeah,
wow.
I think that the max we did was like 12 or 13 in a day. And we would do shows of 12 minutes by then. We just make it just boom, 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 pass the hat, boom, pass the hat, and don't stop, because as soon as you would stop after 7 or 8 shows, you wouldn't get up anymore. So just keep going.
I was gonna say, how could you keep off the exhaustion from that? Because doing that many shows, it's incredibly draining.
It was crazy. At night, in the evening, we would go to the Sento, the Japanese bathhouse, and because we weren't the only ones. Everybody was, all the other performers. We were all just performing because we could do as many shows as we want. We had like 3 shows that we had to do, but if we wanted to do more, of course, the organization was like, "Yeah, go ahead," and we were like, "Loving it." So in the evening, we were just sitting there in the hot bath, going like, "Oh," and charging again for the next day. But I mean that, so we made good money. That was fun. But besides that, I met the girlfriend that I ended up with for the next 7 years there. She was a Dutch student there. Michel met an American lady in a bar that he ended up marrying and was with for 7 years. And it was, and we did all these fun shows, and we made a show that we liked. We liked each other, and it was like, oh, this, we should keep doing this. So, and we thought about changing our name then, like the Flying Dutchman. Oh, maybe we should think of something else. And then the guy from Halifax, he called and said like, hey, I got KLM talking to me, and they're opening a new flight, a direct flight from Amsterdam to Halifax. And they saw the Flying Dutchman in the program for this year. It's like, they want to hire you because you're the Flying Dutchman. So it's like, okay, we'll keep the name. It works. And we did we flew up and down on the first flight to Halifax and did a show there.
And so you went straight from Japan to Halifax for that, or did you guys go back to your own countries after that and then correspond?
He had just split up with his girlfriend in Toronto, where he lived, and he sold his house there, or he was still in the process of that I'm not sure. But he moved pretty much straight away to Amsterdam in 1989. That was, of course, very convenient. So we came back to Europe, and we had 3 festivals in Canada, Fredericton, PEI, and we had another. We had also a 10-day city tour in Canada before, in Nova Scotia. Before that, it was the 100-year anniversary of villages, of different little towns that we did, which was kind of funny because a couple of years before I did 2,000 years of Zurich, and here it was like 100 years, a new country, obviously, Canada. But so we did a bit of work on the light supply, and then we did the trip, the trip up and down for KLM to Halifax.
Just before we did the KLM thing, when you went back onto the Liza plane, you're now doing a longer form show. You're doing the 40-minute show, I assume, on the street. I assume you're not doing the 12-minute show.
No, we didn't. Well, the 12-minute was in Japan. We usually did 20 minutes, but just when we did a lot of them, we shortened it. We did it 20, 25 minutes. In Liza plane, our first show, we were so conditioned in Japanese, and we had no idea what we were going to say in English. So our first show, we did it in Japanese on the light supply, which of course didn't really work that well, but it was sort of fun to do.
Well, that's strange, seeing a Dutch guy and a French Canadian doing Japanese in Holland.
Yes, it was very strange. But we only did one show like that. It was kind of fun. Of course, we knew, of course, that it was a bit strange, but it was. Yeah.
Was that just to get into the mechanism, the mood, the progression in a different place?
Well, and we didn't like, we'd improvised a bit before in the year before, but we didn't have a show in English. Our show was in Japanese, so we had to sort of go actually write some things down, like how would we say this in hey, Paul Burke is there, you look the same, Michiel, that's Waldo. Yes, you always look the same too, Paul.
So the show didn't directly translate from Japanese to English. You couldn't just go word for word across.
No. It's like I said before, the show in Japanese is, also my solo show. It's quite different. Even to this day, when we go to Japan, we have different routines that we don't do in Europe. They wouldn't work in Europe.
Why wouldn't they work?
Sometimes they're just too silly. They like a bit slapstick humor there. Sometimes it's funny because we're foreigners and we can get away with it, and here they would just look at you, like one thing, for example, we do is like we used to do this Diablo routine, and then how did it go again? And so we start doing it, and then we say, hey, do a clap. This was a trick. And they go, oh, okay. And then they clap. And then we do another trick, and they go, oh, we have to clap. We say, no, you shouldn't clap. This was a joke. You should laugh. And then they go, oh, haha, and they start laughing, and just that in itself became a funny thing. Whereas if you would do that in Holland, they would just kind of look at you. It's like, what are you doing? You're an idiot, And there, it worked because we were foreigners and playing a bit with the languages, and like we didn't understand it.
Something also as well of the performance culture that you brought to Japan was in some ways an alien culture that Japanese people were trying to understand and trying to engage with in some way. Whereas in Europe, there's this, centuries long tradition of performance, which they understand and they have integrated into their own cultures.
Yeah.
So when you act, they don't get it. They're like, well, no, we do get it. It's just you're the one that's made the mistake.
Exactly. I think so. I mean, Brian Hulse is, I'm sure, has more knowledge about the whole history in Japan. I mean, of course, they've had performing history for centuries, and also circus performers have been there. But I don't know about the street style. Like we've had the jesters, of course, in Europe for ages. And this type of, the old school street shows that we did, and now the contemporary street shows and everything, it's all part of the culture. And there in the early 80s, it was really new. There was hardly any foreigners yet. They were all they started to come in because there was suddenly money, and there was it became easier to communicate. People started to speak a bit of English there, and so you had this whole influx of performers going to Japan.
Brian does talk about this. He talks about a trade war. We'll put his interview up soon. Check it out. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, Brian is an expert on Japan, of course, and then there's a few more that know a lot about that. But I think, yeah, I mean, I remember going back to Japan because we went back to Japan in 2016, I think, for the first time after like 14 years. We hadn't been there. 2002, we did our last gig then at the time in Japan. And then we didn't go till 2016. And I remember talking to the son of the agent, Hashimoto. Hashimoto-san is, a lot of people know him. He's a fantastic guy. And he's brought us to Japan, I don't know, 20 times or something. And his son then was a co-producer by that time. I knew him when he was a kid, but now he was an adult and helping out. And he said, like, there's a lot of stuff that you used to get away with that you can't get away with anymore now. So just be aware of that. They're so used now to performing, and Hashimoto introduced street performing. Also, he has a street performing school, and there's tons of Japanese street performers now, and they used to all be copies of one performer or another, but now there's amazing shows. There's so many original shows, so much more original shows than outside of Japan. It's amazing.
I saw there's a guy called the Akira Show, and he comes and he DJs on a little box that he's built himself to DJ on while he spray paints pictures and runs around the crowd. It's a completely unique show. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's sometimes bizarre, but it's really fun to watch. And
yes,
yeah. So what were we talking about? Japan.
So we were talking about you going back to Holland, the start of the Flying Dutchman, doing street shows there, and doing the first show in Japanese. And after you do the first show in Japanese, you kind of have to retool again. Yeah. Just before we go on, I'd like to, if possible, keep the interview 2 hours. Would you be able to come back and tell the rest of the story another time? Is that possible? So I think we've done 1 hour 45.
Oh my God! You did say that time flies, right?
Yeah,
I had no idea what we're talking about.
Everyone's amazed by how quickly the time goes.
Yeah.
So if we can, that's okay with you. We'll deal with retooling of the show in Holland, what you did to change the show, and then we can get you back on hopefully and do the kind of the ascent of the Flying Dutchman?
Sure, be fun.
Yeah, please. So yeah, you've done the first show in Japanese, and then you have to look at the show in the Liza plane and figure out how the show works. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, we had this. I mean, it wasn't that difficult because we both had experience, obviously, performing in festivals in Western countries. He hadn't been so much. I think. Yeah, he had been to Australia already. He hadn't been to Europe that much, but it's not that different. And
year are we in now?
Was that?
Just to double check. Year are we in now?
This is 1989. This is the first year. The first year I worked with him after that initial show in 1988. So we made up a few routines there. We made a passing routine. That's still one of my favorite routines in our show. Unfortunately, we don't always do it because we actually have to practice to do that routine. Everything else we don't really have to practice. Well, we have to practice our own thing. Like I have to practice, I juggle 7 balls. Well, I have to practice that to keep doing that. Jean-Michel, he should practice, but he never practices. But he's very good unicyclist, luckily, so he doesn't have to practice that much. But the juggling, the passing routine, we would actually have to get together and practice it. So that's why we.
Why would you have to do that? Is it because it's technically difficult? Is it because of the timing?
It is. There is a few technical difficult things in there already. Although we cut out a few things already. Like I used to steal out of a 6-club shower pattern. I would go into a 5-club pattern and then throw them behind my back to him, and he would try and catch them all. We cut that out ages ago because that was too much stress, But Michel is a very good unicyclist. As a juggler, he's not quite as good. So,
he's reasonably good. Let's be honest. If these kind of tricks are being done between you, he's reasonably good.
Well, yeah, he's reasonably good. Well, he always says when I have to get on a unicycle and I always miss it the first time, he always says he's a very good juggler, and that's basically what I say about him. He's a very good unicyclist, So yeah, he's a reasonable juggler, but to that passing routine, we would have to practice it to make it smooth. And I mean, there's always a couple planned drops in there, but that's
one of the things I read. The newspaper thing. I read one report of you guys, a very early show, I think, and they said no drops unless they're on purpose.
I remember that. That was the guy in Halifax who wrote that. Yeah, that's a nice guy. Yeah. So
what do you think about putting purposeful drops in there? Why would you put a purposeful drop inside a routine?
Well, because it was funny. It's like it was the synchronized routine, we call it, and so we juggling synchronized, and then at one point, he's faking tricks while I'm doing them. But I don't see that, and so they're laughing because he's taking the piss out of me because he's not actually doing it. And then I'm doing this really difficult tricks and he's just faking it. He's just holding the clubs and making the movements and it looks funny and people laugh. And then I drop a club and then he drops a club and he goes synchronized, and he's proud because he did the trick. So it's a funny thing, but I have to drop it to make the gag. If I don't drop, no gag. So that's why there's some planned drops in there.
And is it difficult to integrate a planned drop inside of a technical juggling routine?
It is sometimes difficult, especially if you're like in a flow and it's going well and you have to force yourself to drop it. It's always hard to make it look natural when it's going well. It's sort of nice when it just happens, when I'm actually just dropping it at the right moment. It's like, oh, good. Now I don't have to fake it. Yeah.
And did you guys drop offbeat regularly? Were you tight enough that wasn't an issue? You didn't have to integrate stuff into the show for when you dropped? Could you assume that the tricks would work when they needed to?
Yeah, I mean, like in the 5, I juggled 5 balls. We had one drop line in there, and that was usually enough, And actually, also there, I would usually drop on purpose because, especially when I was younger, it was easy to do it without dropping. But I liked that pickup line, that little routine. So I would force if I hadn't dropped there at this point yet, I would purposely drop.
And is there something to make it seem like there's jeopardy when people are watching you? Because if you're doing, I don't know, but I assume if you're doing everything perfect constantly, maybe an element of the drama leaves it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when you drop, people think it's hard, right? Whereas if you do it purposely, they have no idea. I mean, it's a typical thing that Russian jugglers always do, Russian circus performers in general. But for example, there's these two guys that were at the juggling convention in 1989 in Maastricht, the two Mioska Kops, they're called. And fantastic jugglers, and they would pass 10 clubs like over the whole length of the circus ring. You know, they had these really light circus clubs, so they could just whack them from one side to the other. So they did 5 club steals and everything. They were just amazing. So they're doing these 10 clubs passing, and then they would collect. The guy would collect all last, and he would always drop one. You know, so oh man, we dropped. Oh, okay, we have to do it again. So they do it again, and the second time he collects them, and the last time he catches it, and he just flies backwards, you know, like he's being pushed by the weight of the club. And these clubs are so light, you know, but he just like boom, and he falls backwards, and he has all the clubs, and he stands up, and the crowd just goes berserk, you know. It's like, and if he would have done it the first time, of course, you know, it would have been yay. Yeah, exactly. So in that sense, yeah, it's like people always told me that too. If you don't drop, you know, with the 5 balls, it just looks too easy. So you should drop. And and luckily I enjoyed dropping because I had a nice dropping routine that I enjoy.
And how did you guys figure out, in terms of a street show, as far as I'm aware, you build a street show to a finale peak. How do you guys figure out where to go with your finale peak, and what did you go with in the end? Well, in Holland at this time?
I mean, if you look at our show, it's a pretty classic show. The format, you know, it's an old school street show. You know, we build a crowd, or if you work at a festival, you have a crowd, but you're starting to play with the crowd and get in contact. You know, you have fun, you do your things, you impress them here and there, and then the unicycles, of course, you go up in the air, so that's impressive. It looks dangerous because, especially when he used to do his 12-foot unicycle, you know, he mounts from a 9-foot to a 12-foot unicycle. That's a pretty spectacular trick. And of course, we use fire at the end. Well, what's not to like about fire for an audience, you know? So it was here also. It wasn't like we went into a studio and sat down and wrote our show. It just kind of came about, and it was the logical thing to do with the skills that we had, you know. And we weren't going to put the unicycle routine first, obviously. You do it last. Yeah. You know, so it's and he skips rope on his 6-footer, so you have these tricks and, you know, the building of tension. And I just get on the 6-foot. I used to get on the 9-foot unicycle, but it turned out, actually, of course, it's much easier for me to get on the 6-foot. I needed to get volunteers to get on the 9-foot. I never really liked that routine too much. So at one point,
you do the classic thing, trying to struggle to climb up the people,
and exactly.
Come from that.
Yeah, that was it. I didn't. I mean, if I have free mounted the unicycle, but definitely not good enough to put it in the show. That would always take a long time if I would have to do that. But the 6-footer I could easily mount. So then at one point I was just like, why do that 9-footer? I'm just going to do the 6-footer. And it turned out to be a good idea because it's much nicer. You know, the contrast in height looks better, I think. And also there was more comedy because I was, of course, you know, the little guy and he was the tall guy, and he could play with the fire with me, and I could, you know, just all sorts of stuff like that. So it all just came about naturally, basically.
Yeah. And did the show work in Lights Are Playing during this time, straight after the Japanese show, when you're putting it together?
It worked. I mean, we were very fortunate that show, you know, it just worked right away. It was it worked on the Light Supply. People liked the chemistry between us. I mean, we were just doing our thing, but people liked it. And you know, we went to Canada right after that, and there was 3 festivals with prizes. You know, PEI, Fredericton, and Halifax. We won all 3 of them, and I was surprised. Well, you know? I had no idea that people would like it so much.
Let's talk about you winning those festivals and doing those festivals in the next interview, because I think it's a really nice start off to jump off from there.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So we've got about 4.5 minutes. If we're going to be brutal about time, we don't have to. We can be. Is there anything you wanted to say? Because I think there's a lot of faces here that you will know if you see in real life, that you've known through your history. Is there anything you want to say to them before we do the next one in a couple of months' time?
Well, it's when I see these people here on the right, I've named some names before already, and just one of the fun things about our job, I think, is the incredible sense of family. I'm sure you've heard that also in other interviews, but we all, even if you don't necessarily like somebody so much, you're still in the same family, and it doesn't matter. And of course, there's a lot of people that you do like, but even let's say that there's somebody I don't like so much and their amp breaks down, of course, here's my amp, use the amp. Everybody would do that. It's like you're all in it together, and it's so much, the socializing part is so much fun, with all these people. Met them, of course, all over the world, all the time. I mean, in Halifax, that first year in '88, when I went there solo, just hanging around in the student dorms. I mean, the room was shit, but you would have this hall downstairs, and there was a pinball machine, and everybody would just hang out, and you go to restaurants together. It was just so much fun, and even now, like not every summer, but we've been 5 summers to Butte, and there's a bunch of friends like John and Gina have this incredible house there, and they invite friends over every summer, and like Haggis is there, and Ken comes there, and Jason, and more people, and it's just this continuous great trip, and this has been a great trip through memory lane as well. When you asked me, I just started to go like, oh, what do I have to say? And just going back and thinking about all these friends and people that have made an impact in my life. And yeah, it's fun.
Well, Michiel, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again. Everyone who's watching, thank you.
Really. Hey, there's Eileen, just in time. Nice interview. Bye, Eileen.
So everybody, thank you for watching. If you enjoy the show and you can, check out the Patreon, help support if we can. We're going to try and get editors. We're trying to move the show forward in different ways, take different audiences. For now, from me, I'd say thank you, everybody, and goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Goodbye.